Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this evening's event from the Intellectual Forum here at Jesus College. My name is Julian Huppert, and I'm the director of this centre. Jesus College has an incredibly long history. Originally set up in 1144 as a nunnery, became a college in 1496. And so we have seen many changes around the world, many instances where protest or art have made a difference, to give a hint about the subject of today's talk. The Intellectual Forum is much more recent. We were set up in 2016, since when we've run a huge range of events on many, many interesting topics of our time. You can see most of these on our YouTube channel. And they have included a number of things which do touch on events here. We had an amazing film screening of The Ballet of the Nations by Impermanence Theatre, the world premiere of a film about the horrors of the First World War. We've heard from Pakistan's ambassador to the UN about how the geopolitical order has been changing. We've talked to Philippe Sands and many, many others. A year and a half ago, we had an absolutely phenomenal event here with the Moscow Times, which it was part of the TNT lecture series, looking at some of the business-related issues and how money was evading the rules to go to support Russia and Putin. Now, I would love to say that the situation is now completely different. That obscene war is over, things have improved, Russia is no longer a kleptocracy, an authoritarian state. I would love to announce that. I look forward to the next event where we can announce that. But that has not happened, and it's a huge pleasure to welcome back our friends from the Moscow Times. I do get occasionally people looking when we say we're doing something with the Moscow Times, because what many people don't realize is the Moscow Times is not allowed to operate inside Russia anymore. It has had to leave, which gives you some hint of where it is. And they've done a lot of amazing things. They really do deserve your interest, your support, and your reflection. And it's worth reading there just to see how much news there is. And in a moment, we're going to hear from Alexander Gubsky, who's the publisher of the Moscow Times, to say a little bit about what they're doing. But they have also done other things, such as this amazing collection, Artists Against the Kremlin, which we're going to hear a huge amount from Vladimir Shalamov, who was the curator of that exhibition, about that exhibition, about the impact it can have, and some thoughts about the history of that impact and much more. There are also books available for sale, and indeed other merch can be found, I think, from the website. So this is a hugely important and serious event, and it's absolutely wonderful to have you here in person or online. Alexander, do you want to just start off by telling us a bit about the Moscow Times, and I'll let you introduce Vladimir in this project.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Thank you very much, Julian, for inviting us again. Thank you, Jesus College. Thank you, Cambridge. It's a great honor. Again, this is not my first time here, but I'm still feel myself like a student on exam. Yeah. Despite we are the oldest, independent Russian media. And just briefly, why we are here, why did we launch this TMT lecture series? We were established in 1992, 3 months after the collapse of the Soviet Union. And after 3 months, the English language newspapers appeared in Moscow. It was English language, so for expats, and then so the number of expats was exploding in Russia that years. And then, so in 1999, we launched a Russian language newspaper, that publishing house, Vedomosti, together with Financial Times and Wall Street Journal. And for 15 years, that was the leading business and I would say the leading quality newspaper in Russia. But then, so everything was getting worse and worse and worse in Russia. New legislation against foreign investors in media was introduced in 2014 after annexation of Crimea, and 2015, well, all foreign investors, including Financial Times and Wall Street Journal, they were forced to sell their shares in Russian media. So we became, well, so these foreign investors left Russia, and then so Dirk, the founder of Moscow Times, And vedomosti, he bought Moscow Times back in 2017, and he donated all his shares to Dutch NGO, to Stichting, and that was the case how, well, everything, we could save the operation, the Moscow Times, because we had already a legal entity in Netherlands, and we immediately evacuated a month after a full-scale invasion to Ukraine. We all became criminals in Russia, journalists who continued to call war and to write about crimes. And when we found ourselves here in Europe, someone in UK, someone in Netherlands, most of Russians in Germany, because Germany provides humanitarian visa quite easy. Well, we launched this team. Not now anymore, but yes, for previous 3 years. That's why Vladimir will tell you more why most of Russian artists, they are now in Germany. And so we launched this TMT lecture series just to tell to the Western people what's happened in Russia from we are witnesses. So this is just a few figures. What's happened with Russian journalists and scientists and researchers after 2024. This is where we've been already with our lectures, and this is our event, which Vladimir will tell you more. This is exhibition. This year there was a second exhibition, Art Against the Kremlin in Amsterdam, the second edition. I'm really proud about that, because for us as the Moscow Times, we are the bridge, and we'd like to show to the West how strong is anti-war art, how talented are these artists, and I personally would like to help them, because this is the most popular artwork from the last year exhibition. Too fucking late to draw. This artist, she stopped to draw after the full-scale invasion, and she haven't produced nothing for 2 years. But when she sold this artwork for 3,500 euros in the exhibition, she immediately started to draw again, and others started to draw also. And just imagine, there were 150 original artworks from 60 artists from 30 different countries. I made personally about 20 tours this exhibition, and in the beginning I told, oh, look how cool we are, because we have the same logistic problems as main Dutch museums. But then say, oh, you're a journalist, calculate, do fact-checking. Major Dutch museums, they have no more than 10 lenders, no more than 10 or 12 lenders, no more than 10 countries. And we, a group of enthusiasts with almost no money, we deliver it to Amsterdam, 150 original artworks from 30 countries. So that was a real achievement, and so we will continue. And now I'm happy to invite here Vladimir to tell us more about this exhibition. This is the first book. This year we'll publish the second one, and there will be a third one. So it's also, a historical, I would say. It's a great book itself, but it's also part of the history. So please have a look and buy it. Okay, Vladimir, thank you very much for your attention.
I believe we have to switch the presentations because mine is different. Do you know how to do that?
It's on here.
It's on there, yeah. I will just tell you that you will have to. Thanks. I will read a little bit because I'm not that fluent in English as Alexander, but I will try to. So, hi. My name is Vladimir Shalamov. I'm the founder and the producer of projects All Right Reversed, Prometheus, and Artists Against the Kremlin in particular. I was born in a small town called Snezhinsk in a family of engineers and nuclear scientists. It's in the middle of the Urals. At school, I was rather a mediocre student, and if someone had told me as a child that I would one day be given something like a lecture in Cambridge, I wouldn't have believed in it, you know. And my teachers, well, they certainly wouldn't believe in that either. I think the odds back then were 1 in a million, and yet look at me now. I'm here. I'm giving this lecture, standing before you, and about to tell you briefly, as we don't have that much time, right? About protest art in contemporary Russia and the challenges it faces. Well, yes, of course, I understand that this isn't full university lecture at Cambridge, but believe me, when I will tell in my grandchildren about it, it will exactly be remembered as a proper one. So, in previous life, and we, anti-war immigrants from Russia, we always say like that now, in previous life. I had several careers. After graduating from university, where I studied public relations, I worked in marketing for large FMCG companies, and I actually came in 2009 in UK and already gave here a lecture, but back then it was about vodka. Then I lived a rather comfortable and fun life as a freelance artist. I was DJing, went out a lot, and visited and organized a lot of parties, and kind of enjoyed myself. Later, I opened a few small businesses in Moscow, including several clothing stores, and until 2014, I even hosted the fashion and shopping TV show on the Russian television. It was called Depeche Mode, by the way. But after the annexation of Crimea, I couldn't stay there and left the television for obvious reasons. At the same time, I was involved in investigative journalism and activism, and I visited a lot of rallies and strikes, and on a few occasions I was even detained by the police, and as you can see, kind of very smoothly, but I have spent some time in detention also. And as you can imagine, those accusations was nothing but absurdic. For example, here you can see the court documents showing that based solely on two photographs, once in 2019 I was convicted for participating in an unapproved action in Moscow, and the only evidence was witnesses' testimonies from police officers I had never seen before. And those photos were used as testimonies, and you cannot identify particularly nobody on it. And the funniest thing, I wasn't even in the city that day, but I still got penalized for attempting the action. So yeah, later on, I got kind of 4,000 euro from the European Court of Justice, but I haven't received it yet because Russia denunciated the agreement. Yeah. So, when the full-scale war in Ukraine began, remaining in Russia became too dangerous for independent journalists, and me and my colleagues relocated to safer Germany, and now I live in Berlin. And once there, I discovered that journalists and activists, they actually received state and foundation support, but artists did not, even though they faced equal or sometimes even greater risks. And artists lacked those kind of support, representation, and platform. And many Europeans that I've spoken to assumed that Russian artists were kind of silent about the war in Ukraine, but that was absolutely not true. I knew that, because I saw it, that their voices just went unheard. And I decided to try to change that, and since then, I dedicated all my time and all my resources, including some money, into that. Just 2 years ago, together with a small group of enthusiasts, we launched the project All Rights Reversed, now called Prometheus. And at the time, we had no idea what it would become. We simply wanted to hold a small exhibition that we called Anti-Propaganda, and here are some photos from that exhibition. And it was a huge success. Someone who attended the Berlin exhibition mentioned that there is a gallery in Amsterdam who can invite us to a show, and they've given us one wall. And after that show, the gallery invited us to hold a larger pop-up exhibition, and we called it Aftershock. marking the second anniversary of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. And over 4 days, more than 2,000 people visited it, including Alexander Gubsky, the publisher of the Moscow Times. And I don't know, he seemed to like it because a couple of weeks later, he wrote to me, Vladimir, let's do something together. And so for a year and a half, we've been collaborating with the Moscow Times. And our first joint, that's the posters from not every exhibition that we've made, but few of them. So over the our first joint major project was called Artists Against the Kremlin, and it happened in Amsterdam and Bali in 2024. It was also a huge success, and we returned for a second show in 2025. And as you can see, we have developed a lot. We also published 2 books about those exhibitions, and yeah, those some photos of the exposition of the latest edition of Artists Against the Kremlin that just finished in Amsterdam a month ago. Those are the books. Later on you can watch it. So in less than 2 years, we've held 26 protest art exhibitions, published 2 books, and assembled the largest collection of critical art by Russian-speaking artists in the world. And here I am in Cambridge giving this lecture to you. So let's begin. That was just an introduction. Yeah. I've been told that we have little time, and I already used a quarter of it telling you about myself, so sorry about it. Covering all the manifestations of protest art in Russia over the last century, or even just past 2 years, seems like almost impossible, and would take the entire semester at the university. So today it will be not a traditional lecture. I assume you know a lot of that, and you can find this information in ChatGPT or wherever. So let's just structure our story through parallels. How things were then and how they are now. And to keep it even less boring, we will not follow a linear timeline. We'll jump around time a little. So let's first travel back 50 years ago, 1977. Just a year after women were first allowed to study at Jesus College, if I'm not mistaken, right? So year 1977, the art group called Collective Actions hung a banner in a forest near Moscow as an artistic intervention. The banner read, I'm not complaining about anything, I like everything, even though I've never been here before and don't know anything about these places. At that time, Soviet artists were seeking space for their creativity. This action was an attempt to show that uncensored art has no place in the city or public space, and artists were constantly seeking those ways to expand those spaces. As you can imagine, saying exactly what you thought was forbidden, so even in guerrilla actions, artists often used that what is so-called Aesopian language. Today, Russian art is also heavily censored, and free art still has no place in museums or galleries. In 2024, protest artists, just like 50 years ago, have to travel to forests again because politically charged works cannot be displaced anywhere else inside Russia. In 2025, Russian artist Vano Bagamas paid homage to collective actions, but in his work, instead of a philosophical satirical phrase, there was a biblical appeal from a citizen of a military aggressive state. Returning to 1970s, let's look at the famous bulldozer exhibition, so-called bulldozer exhibition, which spontaneously took place in September 1974 in Moscow. This was, again, about seeking opportunities for representation because artists invited their friends to an approved exhibition in Izmailova Park in Moscow. There weren't even protest works there, yet the very fact that it was unsanctioned created massive excitement. The KGB and police quickly dispersed the exhibition, destroying the artworks with tractors and bulldozers, hence the name. The artists were arrested, but it was relatively calm 1970s, and there were no serious court cases or prison sentences. This was, by the way, largely because the Western media drew attention to the event, and it forced Andropov, then head of the KGB, to respond and to avoid an international scandal. All the artist troublemakers were released, And moreover, the authorities even allowed a second approved exhibition 2 weeks later in Izmailova, but because it was sanctioned, it attracted a little public interest. However, the bulldozer exhibition had long-term consequences for some participants. Its main ideologies were forced to leave the USSR. For example, Oscar Rabin and his wife Lydia Masterkova were expelled to Paris and later stripped of their citizenship. By the way, in modern Russia is beginning to consider similar measurements against dissenters. Today, imagining protest exhibitions in Moscow is just impossible. No foreign press can exert pressure on the regime to avoid a scandal. Remember the worldwide campaign for Alexei Navalny's release, or any other political prisoner, or for which there are now thousands, no zero effect. Almost no protest exhibitions are held in Russia today, except for some guerrilla-style actions, as I told you, which I cannot detail here for safety reasons, but to give you an idea, already in 2019, security forces in St. Petersburg welded the doors of the unsanctioned Autumn of the Boss exhibition. Under Putin rule since 1999, repressions against artists had increased geometrically. Artists are persecuted for their work and face real prison sentences. You likely know the stories of Pussy Riot Collective, the art group Voyna. This is their famous action Dick in the FSB's custody, which actually initially only resulted in a fine for the artists, and only later 2 members of Voyna were sentenced to 6 months for the Palace coup action, where they overturned traffic police cars, which was an offensive action itself, honestly speaking. So Pyotr Pavlensky, who was repeatedly detained for his actions and ultimately forced to leave the country, now he lives in Paris and protests against the French government. And to be honest, now I cannot agree with some of his ideas. In 2021, artist and activist Pavel Krysevich was sentenced for 4 years for an action simulating suicide on Red Square. Pavel was released only in 2025, and while in prison, he created a large series of works about prison life featuring skeletons as protagonists, and we exhibited these artworks in Amsterdam, Berlin, Tokyo, Lisbon, and I mean the original art pieces sent to us by his relatives from behind the bars. Later, we even launched a series of such exhibitions called Through the Bars, involving more than 50 political prisoners from Russia who sent us their artworks from behind the bars. And only a few of them have been released since then. One of them is Sasha Skachelenko, who participated in the historic exchange of 20 political prisoners that happened last year. In 2025, she created a series of works about that exchange that you can see now on the screen, which we showed at our latest Amsterdam exhibition. Famous Russian artist Vasily Slonov was sentenced to a year of corrective labor a year ago because the authorities interpreted violence propaganda in one of his Matryoshka's works. And Slonov doesn't even openly protest against the war, but he was punished for free thinking. Another example is artist Daria Pakhonchich, the first Russian artist designated as a foreign agent. Foreign agents must submit quarterly reports to Ministry of Justice in Russia, which consists of more than 60 pages using a prescribed format. And many ignore this absurd requirement, but Daria turned it into an art project, and she sends drawings with her reports from overseas to Russia and stating her true opinions. One of those, you can see it now on the screen. Another example is Party of the Dead, the Party of the Dead, one of the few modern philosophical art collectives from Russia. Also saw some members sentenced in Russia for protest actions and forcing public known figures of the art group into exile. This is far from a complete list. You can understand if. So let's get back to 1970s. It might be even seen that 50 years ago, under the totalitarian USSR, things were somewhat more tolerant, right? Why was that? 1970s, during the Brezhnev so-called era of stagnation, a whole new generation had grown up that had not seen major catastrophes, revolutions, or wars, and mass repressions was not applied. This led, the state itself was in ideological crisis and generally didn't wish to persecute artists. And this led to a generation of free-thinking artists who later became classics of late Soviet art: Komar, Melamid, Pivovarov, Kabakov, Rabin, and many, many others. But of course, consequences always depend on the severity of the action. The same period, St. Petersburg, early morning of 29th of August 1976. On the night of 29th August, in the very center of the city, a 42-meter wide inscription appeared on the wall of Peter and Paul Fortress, impossible to miss. It read, "You crucified freedom, but the human soul knows no chains." This was the work of artists Yuliy Rybakov and Oleg Volkov in response to the suspicious death of their friend, nonconformist artist Evgeny Rukhin, who had been persecuted by the authorities earlier. So when the authorities saw the inscription, police officers were ordered to cover it immediately, but with what? The nearest open shop that they found was a coffin workshop. So the police covered the letters with coffins and lids, adding an unintended layer of meaning to an already legendary piece. Yuliy Rybakov and Oleg Volkov were sentenced to 6 and 7 years in labor camps for that action. And in prison, Yuliy created a series of remarkable graphic works. You can see them now on this slide. The work of Rybakov and Volkov became iconic, inspiring many artists. For example, this slide shows an approved repetition of the piece on the 40th anniversary of its creation in St. Petersburg. Will it be repeated on the 50th anniversary next year? We will see. Hopefully, it won't be necessary, but we'll see. At Prometheus and All Rights Reversed, we mainly work with contemporary rising artists and young creators. They are currently the most active and responding to today's challenges and pressing questions, raising pressing questions. But when Yuliy Rybakov, now living in exile in Armenia, responded to our open call for the latest artists of the Against the Kremlin exhibition and proposed to show the artwork "You Crucified Freedom," we couldn't refuse. And it seemed crucial to build this bridge between the dissidents of the past and today, and we intend to continue this practice. Let's move to 2023. On 12th of June, it's Russia Day, it's a state holiday. A graffiti appeared early morning on the bridge in Moscow. It featured the Russian coat of arms and the word "израсилование," a play of words resembling the Russian word for rape. The artist was identified, arrested, and criminal proceedings were opened, but he managed to flee the country legally without a passport. He now lives in Lithuania. And in 2024, this same artist, Philip Enza, became the first Russian artist who was permitted to travel officially to Ukraine and to create an anti-war artwork. Near Donbass, he created this mural, and later he transformed his work onto the canvas for our exhibition, and it was displayed among the other 150 works at the Bali. Filipenza graffiti has appeared across Russia during the days. Of course, Russian regions are very different. Some cities are more conservative, the others are more liberal. In my hometown, Yekaterinburg, my hometown is considered one of the most liberal, and Filipenza's fully protest mural for 20 years, we've waited for the ballot with hope, which was created in 2019, was only recently covered in 2025, and until then, locals carefully retouched the peeling paint. Let's travel back for more than a century to justify the lecture's title. This slide shows not just random naked people, but our very own emperor, Nicholas II. Nicholas enjoyed leisure, and as a Russian sovereign, he did so on a grand scale. So was there a protest art in Tsarist Russia? Yes, but it was mild, far from harsh, much like the regime and the last emperor himself. There were caricatures ridiculing the emperor, and they were even published in accessible newspapers, mocking him as weak-willed, controlled by Rasputin, and who supposedly ran everything those days, including the empress. Today, by contrast, Putin holds absolute power, and by the early 2010s, he had achieved a monopoly on violence, cleverly instilling fear and loyalty. Russia is entirely a police state now, and this is illustrated by the work of Yekaterinburg artist Tima Radya, shown on the screen. Another artwork, which was created even early in 2008, references Roman satirist Juvenal's phrase about the populace craving bread and circuses. Russian government had adopted this formula, perhaps better than anyone, orchestrating major events, the Olympics, the World Cup, cultural and economical forums, greatly attended by world leaders. Hard to believe, but even in 2018, during the World Cup in Russia, Macron visited France 1, and it was a joy for everyone, but not for British. At that time, FSB agents were already following Navalny across the country, trying to poison him, and political prisoners already filled Russian jails. And less than 4 years later, Putin would begin a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, the first conquest war in Europe since the Second World War. Returning to the early 20th century, liberal or protest-minded artists were mostly anti-monarchy and pro-revolution, actually. So many classic Russian Soviet artists of those time embraced communist ideas enthusiastically, seeking them as a chance to break from bourgeois constraints to create new art, avant-garde, agit-pop, constructivism. Вхутимас, Вхутеин, Ost, Acher, Obmahu, Prolet Kult, Mas, Ginhuk. Those were not, it was not a rap song, those were the titles of the artistic schools and communities in early Soviet Russia. USSR saw a flourishing of new art schools, and Lenin decreed the creation of Khutimas, our answer to Bauhaus, an institute combining art, architecture, design, and industry. The proletarian state happily employed artists like Kazimir Malevich, Mark Chagall, Vasily Kandinsky, Lyubov Popova, El Lisitsky, Alexander Rodchenko, Alexander Dainekov, Vladimir Tatlin, and many others who formed numerous art collectives and worked kind of freely in 1920s. However, flirting with totalitarian regime can never succeed. Soon, once aligned artists became enemies of the people, and avant-garde, constructivism, and unofficial art movements were labeled harmful. Persecution followed. After 1929, Malevich, already world famous, was arrested, interrogated, accused of formalism and espionage, and his works were banned and suprematism condemned as bourgeois decadence. Today, 100 years later, some Russian artists turned to anti-propaganda posters in retro avant-garde style, which is popular and easily recognizable. By the early 1930s, the USSR has cemented its ideological foundation, and Stalin cult of personality prevailed. All artistic practice was formalized in one acceptable direction: social realism. This style glorified labor, the people, the socialist ideas present in life in an idealized, optimistic way. Anything else was declared harmful. In 1934, the first All-Union Congress of Soviet writers took place, at which social realism was officially adopted. The cultural elite of USSR attended the Congress, and everyone smiled, applauded to Politburo, and voted in favor of adopting socialism and strict censorship norms. Later, many of the participants themselves became victims of this very law. Of the 600 delegates, over 200 were repressed and perished in the Gulag system. This is the subject of a series of artworks by the artist Unknown, which we recently exhibited in Amsterdam, and she painted in the mouths of the famous attendees of that Congress. Okay, yeah, we can remember Boris Sveshnikov, Lev Kropivnitsky, and Alexander Drevich as few people who actually faced this Gulag system also. But very interesting is the story of Julos Oster, because the desire to resist sometimes produces unusual, even paradoxical effects. In 1949, Julo, he was actually, his artistic practice almost aligned with the social realism those days. But in 1949, he was arrested on charges and sent to the Gulag for 10 years. And there he developed his philosophy of enclosed space and cyclical time, which later became recognizable and brought him fame. And Saucer became a key figure in nonconformism and one of the founders of Moscow Underground, which gave us Oskar Rabin, Ernst Neizvestny, Lydia Masterkova, Ilya Kabakov, Viktor Pivovarov, and many, many others. Speaking of the metamorphosis of censorship, let us consider the realities of contemporary Russia. As you know, exhibitions are usually organized by art curators, but in Russia, the word curator carries another figurative meaning, sometimes from the FSB, overseeing a particular area, in our case, art. Today in Russia, the practice is established whereby it is not art curators, but FSB curators who gave the final approval for an exhibition. If an exhibition is disapproved, it simply will not open. And if FSB curators find works by prohibited artists, the exhibition is shut down. Attempts to control the art space began long ago, so we have evidence of this at least since 2017. Some recent examples. Artist Pavel Atdelnov, those days a laureate of Russia's top contemporary art award innovation and one of the country's most promising young artists. In early 2022, he spoke out against the war in Ukraine, left the country, and now lives and works in London, by the way. While his works themselves are not protest-oriented straightly, his position placed him on blacklist and his works began to be removed from exhibitions across Russia. Another example, in 2022, the State Tretyakov Gallery announced but never opened Grisha Brushkin's exhibition Change of Scenery, although in 2017, Brushkin had represented Russia with this project at the Venice Biennale. So why? This project doesn't protest against the authorities directly, rather it raises questions of collective and personal memory of the individual and the state, and in a country at war with the entire world, such topics are obviously forbidden. So meanwhile, artist Pavel Pepperstein, son of Viktor Pivovarov, proactively called the FSB before opening his exhibition in 2022 and invited them to come and approve the show. So here he sits and likely awaiting inspection by the curators. After Stalin, the USSR experienced so-called thaw, which affected all spheres of life, including art. In 1965, artists were even allowed to organize a major exhibition at the Manege in Moscow, an important venue. The General Secretary Nikita Khrushchev himself came to the exhibition and he was guided through the works and interacted with artists. Yet the exhibition didn't impress him. Well, in fact, quite opposite. He was quite shocked and he literally yelled at everyone present. So here's a quotation of what he said about it. And don't be surprised that Nikita Sergeyevich, in his attempt to insult the artists, called them homosexuals. In the USSR, being labeled as such was highly offensive. The Soviet criminal code even criminalized homosexuality, and people were imprisoned for example. They were imprisoned for that. For example, a famous filmmaker and artist, Sergei Parajanov. In contemporary Russia, matters are even worse. Recently, an officially non-existent organization, LGBTQ, was declared an extremist in Russia. And all the people identifying with queer community or culture are now considered criminals. It's like hundreds of thousands of people. At our most recent exhibition in Amsterdam, much of the display addressed this issue. And as you can see, even the darkest and the most complex problems, artists often confront with uniquely personal sarcasm and humor. And let's talk about this a bit. Surprisingly, there were stories of true punk nonconformists who somehow managed to avoid harsh repression in USSR despite their openly anti-Soviet stance. In many cases, they succeeded precisely because their protest took the form from irony. One of the most striking examples is, without doubt, the Armenian Soviet artist Vagrich Bakhchenyan. Perhaps the fact that Vagrich was born and formed as an artist not in Moscow or Leningrad, but in Kharkiv, saved him from repression and allowed him to mock Soviet reality with sharp wit. So those are some artworks by Vagrich Bakhchenyan. And humor in fact, has always been an important element of protest art. Another remarkable example is the story of the art duo Vitaly Komar and Alexander Melamid. Already in 1970s, Komar and Melamid created their own satirical, recognizable style, a response to social realism, and called it soc art. In 1970s, they experimented rather cautiously, portraying themselves as Soviet leaders or painting over propaganda slogans and banners. But by the 80s, they mocked the USSR, the communism itself, its leaders, and the entire Soviet legacy quite openly. Today we are witnessing a large number of artists who use humor as weapon, and their works often become memes. At the beginning of the full-scale invasion, such impressions were rare. It felt like it was not right time for joking. But by 2025, satirical art has become more and more visible. 1990s and early 2000 marked a new era, a new country, new horizons, new opportunities, new priorities. While the authorities were busy with consolidating a monolithic system, artists enjoyed an extraordinary sense of freedom. It's no coincidence that precisely in 1990s, 2000s, and even the early 2010s, an enormous number of famous public actions and performances took place. For example, this one in 1999, when artists occupied, believe it or not, the sacred Lenin Mausoleum on Red Square, got away with small fines. When members of the group AT laid out the word "dick" on Russian Square using human bodies, they too were almost unpunished. Alexander Brenner challenged Yeltsin to a duel on a Red Square. Oleg Kulik attacked people while performing as a dog. In 2010, the art group Vaina turned over police cars, and only 2 people were sentenced to 6 months in jail, truly a tolerant time compared to the present. For their project, The Era of Mercy, featuring photographs of kissing policemen and ballerinas in a birch forest, the art group Blue Noses actually received awards in the fields of contemporary art. And even much later, in 2018, Pyotr Verzilov was detained during the World Cup final after running onto the field in a police uniform protesting against police brutality. But he was released just after 15 days. Today, by the way, Verzilov is fighting in the Ukrainian armed forces and is officially labeled as terrorist by Russia. One of my very favorite art groups, Art Group PG, published an online magazine featuring satirical takes on Russian issues, corruption among security forces, bureaucracy, and ethnic divisions. In 2010, the group released a series that include, among others, things, the portrait of President Putin labeled Pizdabol, loosely pussy talker, and they also criticized the unlimited power of the Orthodox Church. Here is worth noting, even in the relatively free 90s and 2000s, there were still taboo topics. Criticism of the church was punished more severely than criticism of the authorities. Why? It's simple arithmetic. At that time, only about 1/3 of the population supported the government, while more than half of the population identified as religious. The state sought to protect and instrumentalize the church so that the church would legitimize the regime later. And it must be said, it succeeded. In 1998, Moscow artist Avdiy Tiraganyan performed a piece titled The Young Atheist at the Art Manege Fair. He smashed several reproductions of Orthodox icons with an axe. The performance was witnessed by only a few people, an utterly ordinary event for the art world. But the reaction was extraordinary. Avdiy was charged with offending religious feelings, forced to flee Russia, and lived in Czech Republic for 15 years until the statute of limitations expired. Later, however, he returned to Russia and, in a surprising twist, began supporting the regime. Yes, now he is pro-Crimea and overall not against the war in Ukraine. And meanwhile, his son David has become a notable protest artist. So yeah, life can be ironic. Another recent example of a broken artistic bond, 2 friends, an artist, Slava Peterka and Vladimir Abih. Their careers kind of developed more or less in a parallel. And they created many, many collaborative works together. The art was highly socially charged. For instance, they made portraits of homeless people using footprints of passerbys who ignored them. A brilliant project, as I believe. Even in 2022, 2023, at the beginning of their emigration, both anti-war emigration, both seemed united in believing that the war in Ukraine was wrong. Both emigrated, and in Montenegro, they even made a moderately anti-war graffiti series together. Later, Slava Peterka moved to Europe, and he creates anti-war artworks, while Vladimir Abih returned to Russia. Now Slava Peterka takes part in our exhibitions and paints anti-war works, while Vladimir Abih decorates and paints military factories in Russia. Guess which one of them lives better? All right, let's talk about this. Over the past 2 years, I'm finishing. I have worked with about 300 artists and shown more than 700 artworks at various exhibitions and gathered some analytical insights and trends in current protest art. I'd like to share them with you. So trend number one, I call it the Pareto principle. Roughly 20% of artists who are involved in political art have left Russia, while 80% still remain inside the country. Yet those 80% produce less than 20% of the total amount of protest artworks. I mean, this is understandable, but we really feel it. We do work with artists who produce political art and who still remain in Russia, and we smuggle their artworks and bring them to Europe and show it to public, and it's very strict protocol of safety. They always perform either anonymously or under their new pseudonyms. We create those pseudonyms to them. Second trend, artists make fewer artworks than before the war. So in 2022, when the full-scale invasion in Ukraine started, many artists felt like it was not the appropriate time to say anything, even if it were anti-war work. So we try to convince them to produce more art by giving them the possibility to show it, by creating the market for them. And this entire event show us and show them actually that it is more, it's very important, and their artworks are recognized. So they kind of continue producing political art, and I feel that it's very, very important. In 2025, however, artists produce fewer political artworks than even 3 years ago. It happened because they don't want to turn to the same narratives, and once they already said something anti-war or against Putin, they don't want to continue doing the same. And at the same time, in 2025, they feel like that's the only thing that is important at the moment. So they cannot produce just like regular, beautiful, neutral art. So that's understandable also. A lot of the artworks, they are small scale. So artists, they don't have place to work. They don't have place to store their artworks. They don't have possibilities to produce larger artworks, so they're relatively small, most of them. Dominance of dark color palette, which is also understandable. It's a harsh time and dark times, yeah, dark color palette. A lot of artworks personally addressed to Putin and other figures responsible to the catastrophe. That's also understandable. Yeah, it's important to say that political art is not, current political art is not only about anti-war, but also pro-universal human rights, pro-women rights, pro-queer rights, about decolonialism and sustainability and political prisoners, and we try to cover all that spectrum of narratives. Important to say, so if we compare the situation now and what happened in USSR in protest art, there's much less collectives right now than those days. Those days, actually, it was like the majority of the artworks created that we know now were created by art collectives. And today, there's just a few art collectives, and I try to convince artists to create those art collectives, but they are well divided by Kremlin. They are super frightened to collaborate because they always think that, oh, okay, that guy can be a spy, or this is too dangerous to share the thoughts and stuff. And they work independently, solely, and in my opinion, they could have produced better artworks if they collaborated, and we try to bring them together in at our exhibitions. And sometimes it actually leads to some joint projects, which I really appreciate. A high proportion of women, much higher proportion of women. Lately, we announced an exhibition about the emigration. It's called Arrival. By the way, those of you who might happen to be in Amsterdam on the 7th of November, please come to the vernissage. And we received 130 requests, and more than 80% were women. And now, as I go through the list of the artists that I work with during the last 2 years, I also see this, it's about roughly 70 to 30 between women and men now. The proportion is completely different from what it was in Soviet Russia, for instance, or even in the 90s. Artists use low-quality materials because they don't have enough money to produce, and it's important to react fast because otherwise it won't be actual anymore. And artistic concept usually values more above technical execution, which is also understandable. But at the same time, now it's a very right time to start to be an artist. I know quite a few people who came from other branches and started their artistic career, not even in young age, and are already quite recognizable. And the last trend that I wanted to highlight is that political artworks really address to very, very dark topics, and it's hard to imagine someone buying such artworks and hanging it in their living room. So artworks sell poorly, and also because artists actually, because they make fewer works, they value each one more highly, which naturally raises prices for the artworks. And I would say that now it's a bit overpriced, yet I still believe that that's a very good investment into future because of the fact that there are very few artworks created right now, but by this cohort of artists, like dozens of years will pass, and any of that artwork will cost much, much more because it will be an artifact of the epoch. So I'd like to end this lecture with this photograph, one that mirrors the image we began with. It's 1978, 1 year passed, same art group, collective actions, returned to the same forest, and a year later and wrote a completely different text on the banner. So what does it tell us? Let us answer that for ourselves. Thank you.
Well, thank you for an incredibly powerful lecture. I mean, I almost wanted to pause on almost every one of those images and sort of spend a while talking about them.
I'll share it with you and with the audience if it's possible.
Yeah, I mean, we'd be delighted. So, and of course, there's even more that you didn't touch on that's here in the book. Absolutely incredibly helpful. We do have some time for thoughts, comments, or reflections from people on this. If you're online, please do use the Q&A feature. Are there any?
You've done a great job. You have nothing to worry about. You've given a perfect Cambridge lecture. So I just wanted to say
Thank
no,
you.
no nerves necessary.
I'm still a bit nervous. But
I wanted to press you on the point you made at the end about a very broad definition of protest art. And I wanted to ask you whether you think it is broad enough. And I guess I'm not an art historian or a specialist. I'm asking it more as a philosopher. Like, what counts as protest art? Do you need to have an intention to be to express a political stance? What if you are just refusing to fit in? What if you're just refusing to produce Z art? Does that count as protest to you?
well, if you live in Russia, I believe at some point it does count as a protest.
Okay.
If you live outside of Russia, in my point of view, it's like I cannot judge that if it's enough protest or not enough protest. But personally, I believe, because I should say that those artists, and I have told you the numbers, like 300 artists that we have collaborated with throughout these 2 years of active work, is nothing to compare to the total amount of emerging artists from Russia right now. The vast majority try to avoid such topics. So they just produce their philosophical, neutral art that actually sometimes even address social questions, but not related to the greatest tragedy of our times. And because of that, in my personal view, it's just not actual, because you have those two different definition of art, like contemporary art and actual art. Actual art, is there a word in English for that? Актуальное искусство, maybe someone who speaks Russian can lead me. Crucial, like actual, which is actual right now, engaged. Okay, so, yeah, okay, so it's not necessarily at the same time contemporary and actual. And okay, do I believe that that's still art? And yes, surely, but would I help those artists who don't produce political art targeting those questions? No, I wouldn't. There's pretty much possibilities for such artists, and it's much easier to develop your career, even being with a Russian passport, if you don't turn to those toxic topics, because those toxic topics, they are not allowed into the like exhibitions, and our platform is one of the very few for such artists.
So there's a question at the back.
Yeah, thank you for the lecture. I feel like you did it genuinely great in covering the modern trends, but I felt like there was a little thing that was missing, and especially about the artists who actually stayed in Russia. And I feel like you really made a point of, yeah, now the entry bar is pretty low. And I wanted to emphasize that I think that now in Russia you have this emergence of collective anonymized art. So you would have Malinki Piquet, and it would be like a participatory kind of art where anyone could bring a small like figurine made of like kids like dough, like playing dough, and put it on the street, and it would have like a sign of like a peace sign or something like that. And I feel like there would be other examples. So I mean, Sasha Skochelenko was an obvious one with exchanging the price tags, and that would be some sort of anonymized participatory art that was flourishing. And I was wondering how would you classify that in an art scene, or whether you would like exhibit those kinds of arts outside to actually make them known?
Thank you for the question. It's really important to say that such artivism, which is sometimes closer to activism than to art, because Sasha Skochelenko, for instance, she was not known as an artist before she was sentenced to prison. Only in prison she developed her recognizable style, and now she promotes herself as artist more, because before she promoted herself like a musician and an activist. And there's a lot of examples of such artivism in Russia, which is super important right now, and we do showcase it in our exhibitions, although due to the security issues, we don't really highlight it that much, because the more we highlight it, it multiplies the risk for those who take these actions. And even if they do it anonymously, you know, sometimes we deal with the artists that remain in Russia, that we will showcase their artwork anonymously at one of our exhibitions, and they say, yeah, sure, we understand that it will be anonymously, we will send you the file or the artwork, and I tell them, but if you have a recognizable style, we won't show your artwork at our exhibition because it's too risky for you. They want to take that risk, but we don't want to take it for them. And we say, we convince them that, okay, you should either take a new pseudonym or make it anonymously. They say, okay, but then when somebody publishes the photo from the exhibition, you know, and with the artwork on the wall, they start to repost it on Instagram. And it becomes like we cannot influence on that anymore. So we are a little bit very safe with that. But it's super important what people who stay in Russia are doing right now, because self-censorship, it's even more powerful than censorship. And Russian state, they use that principle. They cannot catch all of the dissents, you know, but they catch some of people who protest and make it very public and very harsh to frighten all the rest, and it kind of works, and we don't want to be the cause of such issues.
Thank you. Just to be clear, you don't have to be sat just over there to ask a question. Everyone else is also allowed to. But we'll take another question there, and I've got some online as well.
Hi, thank you very much. My area of specialty is Ukrainian contemporary war art, specifically the first 3 months of the full-scale invasion. And something that I really noticed in parallel is how you wrote, I think it was 13 points, you know, small scale and so forth. There's a parallel with Ukrainian war art as well, if you want to say. But the thing that kind of jarred me was your 13th point, and that is the commodification. Because Ukrainian artists are painting to survive, meaning they're trying to show what they're experiencing, and they will do it at peril, where you're talking about what sells. And I found that quite difficult when you're talking about protest art and taking a risk where all of a sudden you're commodifying the artwork. And it just, in your presentation, it didn't work well with, I think, what you're trying to talk about is selling artwork where, you know, are they selling artwork and also raising money? Or, you know, what are they doing with this? You're now going into the art market where, I don't know, it's protest art against the Kremlin that you're talking about. And the other thing is, are there other artists that are, say, non-Russian in Artists Against the Kremlin?
Thank you for the question. First of all, there are quite a few Ukrainian artists who exhibit at our shows also, and we never intend to contact them. It's always their intention to join us. Talking about how people use the money, they use it also to survive, because when they are forced to leave their country, and the only medium that they have is artistic medium, and they are not granted with support, a part of the journalists and activists, as I was told. So what can they do? They can only draw. And imagine, there is two possibilities. They can draw some neutral art and sell it, or at the same time they can invest their money and time into producing political art, which is much more challenging to sell. So when we sell it and when they sell it, I don't judge them how they use that money. I know for sure that some donate it in favor of Ukraine, and we do some charity auctions. At the last exhibition, Artists Against the Kremlin, we raised more than 8,000 euro in support of one Ukrainian foundation with our charity auction. And artists, they donated their artworks into that. So we do think about that, and we try to support Ukrainians as we could, but that cannot be the only focus of what we are doing, because there's like much more problems, unfortunately. And there are artists who could have. I showed you the example of Vladimir Abih and Slava Paterka. They were similar, really, like level. I mean, before they split, and now Slava is trying to survive, living in Paris in a tiny apartment and paying for everything himself, without knowing a language, without long-term visa, without any institutions working with him. And at the same time, Vladimir Abih, who came back to Russia, has the state contracts and painting over the factories of and receiving millions for that, you know. And for Slava, he thinks like, okay, I could have done the same, and even if I came back to Russia, because right now in Russia, the art market is just blasting. It's like, since it's very localized, all of the like buyers who could who went before to Art Basel to buy artworks, you know, they can't do it anymore. I mean, so frequently and so easy. They have to turn to the local market, and all the local art fairs like Kosmoscow, they sell much more than before. So artists who stayed in Russia right now can develop their careers much easily than those who just took that decision to leave. And they were, some of them, they were not even forced to do that, so they didn't have any like open cases. It was just their decision. They don't want to stay in that country and pay the taxes and stuff. Me, I had personally, I had some businesses in Russia. I could have kept it, but I just closed it on the 24th of February 2022 because I didn't want to pay a penny of taxes to Russian state, you know. And from I was super privileged because I had work as a journalist. I had some savings and stuff. I was granted a visa to relocate, and those artists, they had none of that. None of that. No savings, no contracts, no nothing. And they could have stayed, and they still went. And now here they actively oppose the regime. So I really want to support them as much as I can. And I really believe that it's in favor of Ukraine.
There's a question over here.
Thank you so much. In fact, I have two quick questions. The first one is about geography of your project. So what extent in the slides you can see the artists are from Moscow and St. Petersburg, and you grown up not in these cities, right? And I wonder to what extent these artists are actually representative of the whole country. Because historically we know how St. Petersburg and Moscow, they dominate the artistic scene. And the second part of the question kind of resonates to what already was asked about the meaning of the art and kind of politically charged art. And you kind of created a very clear boundary between the politically charged art and actually neutral or philosophical. And I wanted to press you a bit on that. Do you actually believe in neutral art?
I do believe in it, but I just think that there's plenty of curators who work in that field. And I'm not the art curator, honestly. I'm a producer, I'm a project manager. I build up this project, and I have to, in some projects, I'm also a curator, because there's just no other curators who want to curate such exhibitions. So when I approach the well-known Russian curators who live in exile right now, even when we have budget for that, they said, oh no, thank you, it's too toxic for us. We will stick to this neutral art because we have contracts with institutions, and we still have some buyers from Russia, so we don't want to do that. There's not like a line of people who want to do that. Only because of that, I work as a curator in my own exhibitions. But I really want it to change, honestly. And the first question you asked about the artists from the regions. We do have plenty of them, and we work with them a lot. Yeah, as you stated it, and it's right. What happened in Moscow and St. Petersburg is just more visible. I don't want to highlight some very cool examples of protest that's happening in Russian regions, because they specifically asked me not to do that during this lecture. But later on, we can speak about that.
A couple of questions from online. The first one is you commented on how most of the protest art is by women.
Right.
Why?
Well, I believe that there is a complex of reasons for that. Well, first, Russian community, even who share their modern ethics and modern values, let's say, are still very patriarchal. And families, they are built on understanding that men should work and bring money into family, and women can do something, whatever they want. So they are more flexible, let's say. That's first. The second is just the crisis of the masculinity, because really Russian men who was in charge of everything, they failed. And women start to be more independent and start to be more active, and they start to do what men were supposed to do before. Third is that there's just from women artists that we work with, there's a lot of artists who's not married or have a partner, so they live alone. And I don't know, somehow maybe it was easier for them to take that decision to leave the country or not, because there's just much more women artists that we get approached by than men. So it's just like that.
If we can perhaps finish with another thing here. So firstly, thank you for an excellent and thought-provoking talk. It really made me concerned. What can those of us here in the West do? What would make a difference? And can I just add to that, perhaps do you want to say a bit more about the book and other things that people could do? So what can we all do?
So just show your interest in many ways, and we really feel a lot of support already from the West. And honestly speaking, there's much more interest from the Western people than from Russian exiled community towards this kind of art. So the Moscow Times, they operate in 2 languages. In Russian, they have Russian edition and the English edition. And when we started the crowdfunding campaign for those exhibitions, 95% of funds came from the English-speaking audience. The same is, I witnessed the interest at the exhibition themselves. So when we produce an exhibition in Berlin, and we do have a small space there, and it's rather small, and it's well known among the Russian exiled community, and I would say that the majority of people who attend our exhibitions are from Russian-speaking communities. But they come and they don't want to, they don't want to learn deeply what is there. They come just to show solidarity. But when we make an exhibition in Tokyo or in Lisbon or in Amsterdam, it's like over 90% of the visitors, they are not Russian speaking, and they spend much more time compared to Russian speaking audience at the exhibition. They raise much more questions, they are much more concerned, and it shows for us that it's really important for the Western audience, let's say, to learn, to study it, and also to support. And you can support in many ways. You can buy our products, and we want to be sustainable. We do have a merchandise project called Prometheus Shop, where we create merchandise with the artworks that we show at the exhibitions. We produce such products as this book, and we will continue expanding the product catalog next year. So yeah, there's a lot of possibilities to support.
Well, thank you very, very much for a truly amazing, terrifying, thought-provoking talk, and it's really been great to have you here and to share that with everybody. So thank you so much for being here. We look forward to seeing the next edition. We look forward to the effects that all of this art will have. But thank you very much, Vladimir, Alexander. Thank you so much for being here with us.